Hello, everyone. We're here for the inaugural Two Guys, One Couch podcast. So, my name's Nick. This is Jory.
Well, hello.
Introduce yourself.
No, thank you. That's going to be the podcast. He's just going to talk for me.
It's going to talk over the top of him.
Yeah.
Anyway, what's on your mind today?
Yeah. So, well, I mean, for me, the rationale for the podcast is, I guess, to have discussions with people and learn about how they think about things, and also see, where I'm maybe not considering the whole picture, I guess.
Okay. So as a way to sort of formalise a conversation.
That's right. So something which is on my mind, Nick. Do we want to start with the controversial one?
Start where you want to start.
All right.
Or do we... Actually, good point. Let's soften you up.
Yeah, we've got to ease into it.
So my controversial issue, which has been... I think initially when this happened, I was all for it. It seemed like a meaningful way to impart some sort of change for the better. It's pretty minor. It was the whole cardboard straws, right? Everyone's seen the images of the turtle with the straw in its little nose, and it was like, oh, we better get rid of plastic straws. But in the 5 years since then, it's been nothing but pain and suffering. Not for the turtles, but for me.
Yeah.
My life has been demonstrably worse. Straws disintegrating, really, really suffered through that. But I honestly don't think it's made that much of an impact globally. I think it's a nice thing to feel that we're doing something and blah, blah, blah. But I think you end up using twice as many straws, if not more than twice as many. They disintegrate. They're a useless product. I'm not sure if they even have like a plastic lining inside them. But anyway, I wish we had plastic straws again. And you can hold me to that.
Yeah. Yeah, I think for me, it's one of those things which makes people feel better about taking action on climate change in the same way of like the conceptualization of like your carbon footprint.
Which is funded by oil companies. The whole notion of a individual climate footprint. But anyway.
So it is feel good. And like, I got to say, I don't feel as strongly about it. I don't really come across plastic straws in my everyday life very regularly. But actually, I will say, I donate blood, flex, and the poppers that they have there, cardboard straws in the poppers. And mate, I have anyone who's tried to push a cardboard straw through the foil of a popper.
That's suffering. That is plain and simple.
It's my cross to bear.
But yeah, so that's maybe not indicative of where this whole conversation's going to go, but that's, as an aside, I think there's lots of little things that feel, as a whole, I think when you add them all up, it gives you that. I think maybe that's what like deep-seated conservatism is. It's just when you bundle up a whole lot of seemingly nonsensical issues that have made you or your life individually perhaps a tiny little bit worse.
Yeah.
And you roll them into like a personality, and it's like, I actually just don't like immigrants. Yeah. Or something along those lines.
I think there is actually, maybe something to what you said there, where maybe people who feel or like skeptical of authority, they have a lot of things in their life like plastic straws kind of thing. I don't know, what would another example be? It's like wearing a mask. That's a great one.
Some level of your individual freedom or individual choice has been taken away.
Yeah, and it's each little thing, not that big a deal, but you sort of roll all that up and it just can create this amorphous sense of like, nanny statism and dislike for authority. Which
sort of leads us to the next topic, which is probably a little more meaty. And hopefully...
What to talk about.
Yes. Yeah. Why don't you kick it off?
I'll kick it off. So, I want to talk about this without it being like a meta commentary of like, it's not a podcast about podcasts sort of thing, because that's sort of how I came across the information. And the topic is like the birth rate decline, the collapse that sort of I've seen online, and where I've come across it has been on primarily through Modern Wisdom. He did a podcast in 2023 with a guy whose name I'm blanking on right now, and did a follow-up one not too long ago, maybe a month or two, whenever this is. I don't want to date it, but early October 2025. And yeah, I mean, I find it an interesting topic because, so first of all, they are right. Like in terms of birth rates are decreasing. But for me, it gets interesting around the why they're sort of decreasing, like why it's decreasing, and then when people talk about why it's a problem and how that is framed and sort of politicized by kind of either side. So without getting into a tangent, as this is the first podcast, I will specify I generally dislike the distinction left and right, apart from when it is like just convenient shorthand conversationally.
You mean politically?
Yeah. So it's sort of like, you know, someone's like progressives, you call them left. And it's like, well, you know, depending on what their brand of progressive stuff is, you know, they may not be like a left sort of thing. Like it is more of that political compass in my mind. Anyway, that is a tangent. So sorry for that. But back to the birth rate stuff. So do you have any voices you want to voice? Or can I continue to monologue?
No, go.
Okay, cool. Well, I'll continue to monologue then. So, for me, when the topic of it being an issue is discussed, it's normally framed, and as it is framed in the Modern Wisdom podcast, it's framed as basically going to create societies where you have an aging population, and on the first point, you can't, as we currently care for older people, we would basically be unable to care for the number of old people which currently exist. So, you know, by allowing birth rates to decline, you're going to create a world in which basically old people are living in pain, to describe it broadly, because, you know, there's no one to take care of them as they get older. There's no one to like nurse them. There's no one to like take them out. There's like, so you have that problem. And then the other problem is the idea of a lot of basically taxation revenue will fall, because when someone gets old, they retire, they stop working, they stop being quote unquote productive. And so decreasing number of young people to sort of pay tax and pay for social programs such as like the pension. It depends on like the country that you're in, sort of thing. So like the conversation, a lot of that you see online is centered around the United States, where you have social programs like Social Security, which basically pays like a pension, as I understand it. But the money that they're paying people is effectively the taxation revenue from current people who are currently working. So it is quite literally almost a Ponzi scheme in terms of like the system only works while more money sort of rolls into it.
Or at least enough money to pay out regularly.
Yeah. So, I mean, there's that. I mean, in Australia, we have systems like, superannuation, where, you know, because of that, we have less of a reliance on the pension. I mean, we still have like a reliance on the pension, and like just simply say, oh, because of superannuation, we'd be fine, ignores the fact that if there's not enough people to care for the old people, well, the demand will increase, the supply won't be there. And Economics 101 says that the price will just go up and would, like, again.
And that's already sort of the case. Like, as Australia's already in the, maybe not the, we're definitely not sort of as bad as, say, like Japan or other countries, but we do have an aging population. And I think every country that had a baby boom is now going through a reckoning with that lump of population. Because it is such a huge chunk of people that are now all aging at the same time and require high levels of care and have come to expect a high level of care in a first world country. Like, if you look at other countries, it's also a cultural thing. Like, other countries, you'll potentially look after your parents at home after they've raised you. You sort of
like multi-generational households.
Yeah, you carry on that sort of burden. It's not even a burden culturally, it's just what you do. Like, everyone, you know, their parents live at home until they pass on. But culturally, at least in Australia, that's not what we do. It's pretty common here for your sort of grandparents or your parents to go to a nursing home, and then they're cared for there by professionals, and you pay them either by a room, which then there's different economic models for how those places are funded. There's a level of government funding. But yes, as the population ages, and then we don't have the replacement birth rate or the birth rate to increase population, you end up in a position where you don't have enough bodies to provide those services. And this can be seen really badly in Japan and sort of South Korea. And it actually ends up becoming a cycle where because they've been in a declining birth rate for so long, there's less and less job opportunities for young people because it sort of becomes this vicious cycle where people move out of the country and then it exacerbates the problem, and then you end up in this real downward spiral. Japan's got so many incentives for people to have kids and just nothing works.
Well, I mean, it's interesting you bring up Japan. So in that second Modern Wisdom podcast, the guest there speaks about actually sort of conceptually in Japan, the idea of because a lot of promotion is tenure based, a lot of people are in a lot of ways disincentivized to have kids, because if you think about it, if you sort of exist in a middle layer, you have someone above you and someone below you. So if you're a woman specifically, so if the person, the way of thinking is if the person above you has a kid and they exit the workforce for some period of time to spend time with their kid, what a concept, then you'll probably get their job kind of thing. But then, if you think about for yourself, if you have a kid and the person below you, well, they'll probably get you a job. And then it's kind of well, where does that sort of leave me? And that is, something else about the subject, which I find really interesting, which is, in a lot of ways, society is constructed where essentially, a lot of things are kind of zero sum in that, if you want a high paying job, it's kind of well, you need to achieve more education a lot of the time. You need to professionally excel or something like that. We see it in Australia with cost of living stuff going up. Well, that's a global problem. But if you just think about that in terms of, to quote unquote get ahead, sort of the personal sacrifice that you need to make to sort of do that, means that you aren't taking time out of the workforce to have a family because you need to buy a house or whatever else. And in Australia that is kind of in a lot of ways to have more of a sense of security and that kind of thing. That's one example. But you can't really, you're really disincentivized from exiting the workforce for really any period of time.
That hasn't been the way it's been forever. Typically, especially sort of most Western countries post-war were built around the notion that it was a one working parent family, and one parent, typically the man, would provide the income and the other caregiver would be a homemaker.
And this isn't, to be clear, we're not discounting any of that homemaking work.
No, not at all.
It is
very
work.
valuable. But that model no longer exists because to afford most homes, you need dual incomes. And then it becomes the juggle of...
To afford any assets. Let's not even talk about
much,
homes, to afford assets and things which, provide
you're 100% better off, literally 100% better off to have two people working. And that straight away is a barrier to having children.
Yep.
If you've built a lifestyle around assets that you can afford on a couple's income, then there's going to be, unfortunately, there still is going to be an economic hit to having children. Even if it's only, even if you take 2-3 months off, there's still a level of stigma, there's still a level of maybe just stigma around having children, as much as people want to say that it's fine to have kids. As a sort of an aside, my partner in her workforce, she works in a blue collar trade, and a lot of the men there are sort of offered offered parental leave when they have kids, and they don't take it because they get made fun of by their friends. So it's it does swing both ways to an extent. Men traditionally don't take the same amount of parental leave that women do. But I think there have been studies which show that by providing higher levels of parental leave to caregivers, there is an economic benefit. Long term, they're more willing to stay with your company. You retain that experience. It's always cheaper to retain than to retrain. So instead of having to go and recruit new people, retrain them in your company, you're almost always better off to retain staff. So there's that economic cost. But back to sort of the broader topic of declining birth rate.
Yeah.
So what is this podcast, or what is the podcast that you listen to posit as to some of the reasons?
So as I mentioned, like basically brass tacks, like economics of it, in terms of like, the idea of getting ahead. You did not incentivized to exit the workforce, so people stay in the workforce, they don't have kids. Another thing which it's I mean, I don't want to put words in their mouth, but it talks broadly around people's attitudes towards having kids and kind of like cultural aspects in the certainty people want to feel before they have kids. So that's the idea of like, if I have a kid, can I provide for it? And
Long-term stability.
Yeah, and that sort of like can go a lot of ways, because you know one way to read that would be maybe there's been some change in like the obligation people feel towards their kids in terms of like the standard of living that they need to be able to provide.
You think that's trended up?
Yeah, I'd say it's trended up. That's anecdotal. That's not based on like any hard facts, but like, I think most people, at least in my social group, like the idea of like, if you have a kid, do they go to private school? Just shit like that, It's just like, do I have a kid? Can I buy them their first car?
Yeah, that's an interesting point.
So that's one thing that they sort of talk about. We can like edge towards that if we need to or want to. Another thing is just like increasing amounts of like individualism that people have. The idea of like, well, I don't want to like compromise my lifestyle to have like children sort of thing. Like I want to be able to travel whenever I want, and I'm like XYZ, which I think feels like a very like white collar, well off first world attitude to have. Like the idea of like, well, I can go to Europe instead of having children, which you absolutely can. Children are very expensive. You could absolutely afford to go to Europe instead of having kids.
The dink conundrum.
Yes, like that stuff. So that's like another part of it. Another part of it is like just the very real uncertainty in the world that exists nowadays. Like, so think about like us, our age, we saw like 9/11, war on terror, global financial crisis. Then we had a good run for like what, till COVID?
Well, Trump's first presidency.
Yeah, Trump's first presidency, and then we saw COVID.
That was a time of remarkable global stability. And that was why I think a lot of people accredited Trump's first term as being a success. It's because nothing happened. Like pretty much late 2019.
Amazingly, nothing fucking happened.
Late 2019, 2020, well, 2020, early 2020, you had COVID, and then war in Ukraine. And then you got sort of all the European political unrest, and then you got Gaza.
War in the Middle East again. It's back.
Yeah.
Did it ever leave? Probably not. So a lot of people like now, and they do cite some research in that episode about like every time there is like a global shock to things like the GFC or like COVID, that broadly speaking delays people's decision to have children by about 3 years. Because they're like, I just want to really make sure I'm on steady ground, which means if you're 26-year-old, and this is the other weird thing that it talks about, which makes sense, or the way it frames it, which makes sense, is it's like having kids being like women's decision in a lot of ways. So it talks about like a 25-year-old woman makes the decision in 3 years to have kids, which makes sense because as a man, like I'm not going to be able to do that on my own.
Well, neither can women. Well, actually, women sort of can.
Yeah. But anyway, so yeah, like conversationally, it is in terms of like women doing X. But yeah, 3 years. So like if you think about, again, people our age, in Australia, we got off pretty lightly with the GFC. God bless Kevin Rudd, Julia Gillard.
Spend that money.
Wayne Swan.
A very basic economic response, but by God, it worked.
Keynesian, like economics 101.
Give the people money.
Yeah. If you have spend it. Yeah, in an economy, if you have a demand problem, spend money, provide stimulus.
Which is what they did, and we sort of glided through that. But we were also sort of insulated relatively from the credit markets, and our resources sector's always been traditionally strong. Australia's traditionally been known as the lucky country, and that's because we've ridden a wave of economic booms through the last 50 years that have been primarily lucky.
Yeah,
like we've become.
Well, I mean, I do find it interesting because I mean, this will take us on a tangent, but like policy-wise, in terms of like people leading the country, like the parties. like there's a lot of parallels that I think you can draw between like Great Britain, like the UK, and like Australia. And there's certainly a lot of wealthy people in like the UK, but like the median person there is probably living a much shittier life than the median person in Australia.
At the moment. Yeah.
For the moment.
Well, I mean,
some point of
the UK's gone off a cliff since Brexit.
Yeah.
Like they're really struggling with wealth inequality and stuff like that. But also, I guess that's another point to be made is that wealth inequality in Australia has been supercharged in the last probably 10 years. I think probably since the early 2000s, there's been a growing level of maybe not wealth, but probably access to assets.
Yeah, and I think
that influences the will we have kids equation, and primarily due to the fact that housing in Australia is grossly unaffordable for most people. And the government has tried and continues to try different methods to tackle that problem
without
much success.
without offsiding the broadest base of their political support, which are homeowners.
Yes, and their own backbenchers who have 40 properties each.
Yeah.
But I think access to stability is probably one of the biggest things you want to have when you're having a child, and that I think starts at home. And by home, I mean by having access to a permanent home. Like renting, Australia is typically 30% renters, 30% homeowners, 30% people with a mortgage. So and look, I'm sure many people that like, God, you can have kids if you rent, like it's not that big of a deal. But I think the Australian dream has been, ever since I was a kid, told to me to be owning your own home.
Huge cultural aspect.
Massively cultural. And we're in a position now where like house prices have doubled in the last 5 years because of numerous reasons. Primarily, like Australia has a very strong immigration policy, which
is related to the birth rate.
It is related. It also sort of is related to the labour problems that we're trying to solve our labour problems related to our birth rate with immigration. Yes. So, like a lot of the people that work in aged care are typically immigrants. That sector is also trying to be cost competitive, so they're typically paid less. So there's questions there about like what are the ethics of bringing in immigrants to do the jobs that Australians don't want to do, as bad as that is.
Yeah, I mean, this is our podcast, so we can go there.
We can go there.
Yeah.
Well, which of those do you want to tackle first?
Yeah, the idea of like having immigrant labour to, basically do a job that Australians don't want.
I think it's cultural. Like I think 100% is cultural. Like you don't. It's going to sound pretty crass, but like no one wants to wipe someone's ass. Yeah. You know. But that's a cultural thing. It's not a job thing. I think. Look, if you look at countries where they have live-in parents or live-in grandparents, you're probably wiping their ass. You're probably giving them a hand, and that's just seen as the done thing. Whereas in Australia, you don't want to.
I don't the idea really of wiping your parents.
Like, mate, they wiped your ass 100,000 times.
That's as nature intended, mate. It's a one-way street.
No, I want to put them in a room where I don't have to think about them.
Yeah.
But don't worry, we'll fund that through the sale of their house, which is now worth some insane amount of money because they bought it, 30 years ago for a and that's the other thing is like the entire the entire aged care facility model is funded by the sale of the family home. So when your parent becomes decrepit, for use of a better word, want of a better word, you put them in a home. And typically the way that my grandma's going through this at the moment, she's got dementia and requires full-time care, but they sold her family home, which, her and my grandfather built that home in northern New South Wales. They built it themselves, never had a mortgage. My grandfather used to smuggle bricks off the construction sites that he laboured on. One brick in the lunchbox because they were in a building supply.
Built the house in literally over 118 years.
Like, it took a while.
Yeah.
They built a garage and they built, there was only brick foundations, but that was their entry into the housing market. And, they built that house by themselves. He was a sort of pseudo carpenter. Never had a mortgage, were terrified of being in debt, just wanted to be sort of left alone, live a normal, not excessive life. Silent generation, everything's too much. We couldn't have that, couldn't have this. Anyway, built the home. 40 years later, they built it in 75. 50 years later, they sold it in like 2020 something. That property sold for like $1.5 million, right? Grandma's room in the place that she's staying was like $700,000. And that pays for the room, and then when you die, you get that money back.
Not all of it.
Well, different models, but in this instance, they get the money back. So
Oh, really?
a lot of the companies that run those financial model, like the financial model, a lot of those companies work on is we will just invest your money while your grandparent lives here, and we'll make a return on it. Like if it's 5 years, we'll make 7 to 10% a year, and you just get the money back later. Because with inflation as well, that money's worth less, whatever.
Yeah.
So that's their model, and that's the way they do it, which is whatever. But yeah, that's become sort of normalized. Is you just, they're getting a bit old, they need care, I'll put them in a home. And then you sell the family home, and then someone else buys it at a ridiculous price to get into the housing market. And then the whole cycle sort of repeats while they're getting their bum wiped by, a Filipino immigrant.
Yeah.
And they're lovely, like they're the nicest people ever in that nursing home. But God knows what they're getting paid. Like it can't be.
Well, yeah, I mean, I'm personally uncomfortable, like ethically, with the idea of, you get an immigrant, like worker in here to work for less than you would otherwise pay an Australian. Even if there's, there would be like an award and like that kind of thing. And that's kind of like...
Those awards are pretty permeable. Like,
yeah, and that's the uncomfortable, thanks John Howard, but yeah, like that's kind of the uncomfortable thing with that stuff, right? Because it's like, well, are you getting your overtime payments? Like all that kind of thing. Like you worked 7 days in a row sort of thing. Like, are you getting...
Yeah, what recourse do you have? None.
Yeah, effectively none, because like,
you might be here on a working visa.
Yeah.
You might not have strong English language skills. You might be able to speak English, but you might not be able to write. Like, there's a level of that. Yeah. There's also,
But like, to still man the case of people saying like, oh no, it is justifiable to pay them less. No air quotes about it, just less. So we're giving them the opportunity to come to this great nation and enjoy a standard of living they wouldn't otherwise get, which is kind of true.
It's sort of true. Like I've had this reckoning as well, and I think this was raised in, might have just been some piece of media that we've consumed, or I've consumed.
Yep.
Is this notion that people are coming to Australia for a better life, and it's like maybe 20 years ago, maybe 30 years ago, 10 years ago. I don't think so. I think, like, if you look at the sort of the Indian immigration schemes that we run, student immigration becomes permanent immigration. We have skilled immigration, blah blah blah. Like 30 years ago, if you're an Indian student coming to Australia, you would have exited that workforce into a relatively affordable housing market and a relatively stable jobs market, right? There's probably a level of, the cultural barrier I think has probably dropped a bit in the last 20 years, but back then you're probably going to be able to get an okay job, and an okay job would be enough to buy a house. Like nowadays, I think if you came across as any sort of immigrant...
Got a dink, mate.
Yeah, well,
dual income, no kids.
I think
a little bit of mum and dad's money.
Exactly. And that's what's happening is that like to be even come across as an Indian immigrant, you have to be a wealthy Indian. And then you become a poor Australian because access to those assets is so guarded because they're so expensive. So the Australian dream as it was, or has been described to me, of owning your own home is unattainable. So you end up in a position where I know, or anecdotally I've heard that some Indian immigrants will live in sort of communal housing one at a time. So you'll have 10, 15 people in one house, save enough money to get a deposit on that house and then move on to the next house. And that's sort of how they are able to afford property long term. But it's like, what's the quality of living with 15 people in one house? You're effectively living in a share house. That's not the Australian dream. It's not, I mean, culturally they might be okay with that idea, but I don't think that's fair for anyone to come to Australia and be expected to live in that way, just to have access to Australia's workforce.
Yeah, or especially when you're paying them to be able to live somewhere.
Yeah, especially when you're paying them less than what they should be paid. Yeah. But then that sort of goes in a circle of like, well, if we were paying them a proper wage, how much would these services cost? And that's where the rubber meets the road, and Australian consumers say, well, I don't want to pay that much.
Yeah,
and that's the case. Yeah, I can't afford that. And that's the case with like meal delivery. That's the case with like most services that have become normalized. They're so cheap. Oh my God, they're so cheap. Because why? Well, because someone's being exploited.
Yeah. That is actually probably a less controversial topic we've got to talk about, is fucking meal delivery stuff. Outlaw it. Get rid of all of it. Oh, totally. It should be legal. I'm sick of it. It drives me insane. Uber Eats, like, we live in like Brisbane, and like just the number of like scooters, just hooning, just like breaking like all the road rules and stuff, and like,
for what?
Wearing shorts,
for no money,
pluggers, for nothing. And it's just like, I mean, man.
And I don't think it's actually improved our quality of life.
No, it hasn't.
It's just improved your access to easy shit food.
Yeah.
Which has its own health effects and blah, blah, blah.
Yeah.
But anyway, birth crisis.
Yes.
So, economic stability. People feel like they don't have it. So they do not want to have kids.
Yes.
Other reasons.
So there was 3, right? There was individualism in terms of people not culturally willing to compromise their life.
Yep.
Real economic factors, meaning they don't want to have kids. And there was a third one, which I've forgotten. But that was broadly speaking, like sort of 3 of them, like sort of the big 3. And sort of how they interact is also interesting because, I mean, we're talking about wealth inequality before, which is related to this point I'm about to make, which is there's currently like a dichotomy in how a lot of people today live, especially in Australia. So simultaneously, people's absolute quality of life is probably at all-time highs. You have, I mean, I have electricity in this house right now. The air conditioning is on. Ready access to air conditioning. All my taps work. I have a septic toilet. I have like a poodle cross dog. Like, dude, I'm living like French aristocracy, like lifestyle right now.
Well, yeah, I mean, if you consider that like 100 years ago, no one was having hot showers.
Yeah.
I have a hot shower every day.
Yeah.
And I think we've lost track, or we might have lost sight of those basic needs.
Yeah.
In the quest for
meal delivery, getting my fucking shit food delivered.
I was going to say in the quest of having 5 investment properties.
Yes.
So that we don't have to work at all.
Yeah.
I think.
But I'd say it's more of just a status thing.
Well,
because that is where I'm going next, which is simultaneously absolute quality of life is at an all-time high. Relative quality of life, and so what I mean by that is like within the distribution of like everyone alive now, like what is their quality of life in terms of like services they enjoy. Relative quality of life is probably at its most disparate in terms of like, you know, as a human being, you notice things like, oh, someone has a slightly nicer watch than you. Someone has slightly nicer shoes. Someone has a job with more status than you. Someone's family has more prestige. Someone's like, you know, the list goes like on and on and on and on and on. Someone has a nicer car than you, like, you know, and that's all like materialistic like stuff, but it's a materialistic society. So relative quality of life is also quite poor while you're still enjoying absolute quality of life at all-time highs, which I think some people from the conservative side of politics say like, yeah, people are more concerned by their relative quality of life than they are by their absolute quality of life.
It can be easy to lose sight of how good things are.
Yeah.
I think
because like, I mean, I know for me, my partner and I, we could have kids and we rent. So, you know, there's the whole argument there of like, well, you know, what if no fault evictions in Queensland? What if they put the rent up, blah, 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 blah. It's like, well, I know about 4 different groups of people who would have a spare room that they would let me stay in, no questions asked, even if there was an infant in tow kind of thing. Like I could be there tomorrow.
Yeah, that inherent safety net is pretty strong.
Yeah, but, you know, and I don't think it's completely unreasonable to sort of want to be like, well, you know, I would rather do that in a house that I own. Yeah,
look, I'm in a slightly different position. My partner and I, we have a mortgage, but that hasn't made, like, we could have kids as well. We're thinking about having kids, but like that hasn't really swayed my decision that much. Like,
interesting.
It really hasn't. I thought it would be like, this is it. We've done it. But instead it just becomes like, you start looking at broader, I think there's a notion that like you get the rat race, right? Oh my God, we're going to save to buy a house. We're going to do it. And then you work your fingers to the bone, you save that disgusting deposit, you know, you buy some terrible, you know, first home somewhere. Congratulations, you've done it. And then it's like, okay, I have to service this mortgage for the next 30 years.
Yeah.
Okay, what are the economic or global headwinds looking like in the next 30 years? Ooh. At the moment, not flash.
Climate change, kind of a bummer.
That's the big one. It's like, why would I want to bring a child into this world with the options they have in front of them? People talk about the Gen Z sort of mental health crisis. And I read, I think in some millennial blog, it was that, or as a millennial, it was hard for us too, but we had hope. You know, we had hope. We had the hope that we could achieve, and our lives would get better. Gen Z doesn't have that hope. They're out there like, I could work my fingers to the bone. I could try so hard. I could be a diligent, little worker for some corpo, whatever. The world's still gonna catch on fire, and we're all gonna die. So there's that. That I think is the prevailing headwind that people are sailing against. Actually, no, you want to sail into a headwind. But regardless, that's the thing which is preventing people from making that leap into having children. Is, I think, economic and global uncertainty. And it's not, there doesn't
It's not
seem
unreasonable things.
No, not at all. That's my biggest concern. Like, I don't think, there used to be sort of de-escalatory sort of checkpoints that we would cross globally. Like, someone would step in and say, all right, guys,
It's maybe a bit
calm
much.
it down. The rhetoric's getting a bit too fiery. But I think, as everyone's seen in the last, 2 years of the Trump presidency, what is it, 2025? 1 year. Oh my God.
Not even 1 year, mate.
Not even a year. We've seen just this escalation upon escalation upon escalation of every conflict globally. And it's just like, we
ended 7 wars.
We could nuke you. It's like,
Checkmate.
Great. Congratulations, you have nuclear weapons.
Yeah.
So there's just this level of like stress and uncertainty about anything.
How do you think that would connect to something I mentioned earlier, which is maybe a cultural shift around obligations people feel like they should have to their kids? To be clear, when I say that, I'm not saying that people from previous generations just had
Were
kids
bad parents?
and were like, fuck them, like they'll be fine. I think there was certainly some amount of that.
100%. That was,
Yeah, all right. Yeah.
well, I mean, so what? There was that needle has swung back and forth every generation, right? So if you were born to baby boomers, they were so busy living their own life, they didn't really care about yours. So you just run amok, do whatever you want. You were meant to be seen and not heard. Oh God, just shut up. You're being a child, you're just being too loud. And then it swung the other way, sort of with millennials. Not millennials.
Their kids became Gen X.
Yeah, their kids became helicopter parents. Yeah. And then their kids, it's culturally it swings, generationally it swings back and forth. But if I was to have children, I think, look, the thing I've talked about with my partner is like, we would take it very seriously. It'd be like, we're not going to have kids unless we can do it right. And that, I think, is probably the approach.
Yeah.
But that's pretty loaded though. Like, what does right mean? Does that mean
you kind of fucked up?
Well, what does that mean? Like, kids are going to be kids. They're going to be imperfect. They're going to have their own problems. Like, we're going to have our own problems throughout our life.
Yeah.
But what does that mean?
Yeah.
Like, how do we be like? I think my parents didn't. God, my parents, bless them.
It's on video, Nick. You don't want you to hear your dad, let your hit dad hear you say that you're loving me. You think you did good.
He's heard it all before. But I think like I don't think they were very aware of who they were when they had kids. They just had kids. Like, they were 29 when they had me, and like my dad has said to me, my parents since divorced like 15 years later, but my dad has said to me he didn't really feel he knew who he was as a man until he went to like a men's group in his 40s as part of the divorce proceedings. He said he didn't really get a sense of who he was as a man until 15 years after I was born. So he was just working it out when I was a teenager, and that's a recipe for disaster, I think. And it was. I mean, it wasn't.
Now he's on a podcast.
Now,
this is
now look at me.
a sad indictment.
Yeah, it's all gone wrong. But and my mum as well. Like, she didn't really know, I think, who she was, and then they just had kids because that's what you did.
Yeah.
And that was like, they had kids late 20s, which is sort of currently the median birth age in Australia is 32.
Yeah. All right.
Which is sort of where it's at. Births for women.
First birth,
32. So births for women from 18 to 24 have dropped hugely,
believe it.
And also 24 to 30 have dropped.
Yeah.
But interestingly, birth rates for women 40 to 44 have like doubled. So that's the other thing. I think we're seeing this shift. People are having kids later.
Yeah.
Which also exacerbates sort of population issues because they're going to be old parents.
Yes.
Yeah.
So that is discussed in the original, like the kindling or spark for this conversation about so something which is put forward is the idea of, people just aren't having kids as young. They're just having kids as old.
Well, they're having they're having less kids as well.
And so something which is like another piece of the stats which is interesting is like, so the stats around So there's an important distinction to make around people who have kids. So basically, if you have one child, kind of like you are like the stats around the number of children you have after that in any given number of time is kind of the same. So if you start having kids when you're 20, like given that you can still have kids and whatever else, you'll probably have roughly the same number of kids as if you'd started when you were 30 or 32.
Interesting.
What's really changing culturally is people having no kids. Because like when we talk about that stat, right, of people who are, median age for women's first birth is 32. That stat actually doesn't count all the women who just don't have kids, if you think about it. It's only counting the people who actually had their first kid.
I guess there is a lot
and
of...
so like that's a cultural thing in terms of like, a lot of women just aren't. But then, when people do say like, well, people are just having kids older, I mean, there are some unfortunate biological realities around that. People propose technology like IVF to sort of help mitigate some of those issues, which is like, does work. But again, then it becomes, it's like unbelievably expensive. So then it, again,
privileged.
It becomes like, only people who are privileged can have children as they age. And then it does perpetuate that economic issue, right? Because it's like, well, I'm competing against people who are like not having kids until they're older for resources.
I should stay in the workplace.
For assets and resources kind of thing. So if I opt out of that now, I will never sort of achieve their level of material wealth.
It's just become this like rat race to the extreme of like competing for resources to the detriment of life.
Well, that's kind of like the individualism thing. Where it's like, I need this stuff.
Well, and it's also like, what do you actually need to raise a family? What do you need?
Yeah, actually, not a crazy amount.
Not a whole lot. Like,
do they go to private school in the inner city?
But I mean,
Probably not.
That's the other thing is like, if you have more and more of a society who's opting to send their kids to private schools, then schools as a political issue become almost irrelevant. Like, and if like funding of public schools, funding of public resource becomes this sort of irrelevant, topic for voting. It's like, why would we fund schools? I'm just going to send my kid to a private school anyway.
Yeah.
Like, why would we support,
So
public services?
I mean, this will take us on a segue to another part of it. So sorry for jumping around.
Stand by.
But so that was the idea, right? Of like, as less people are working, there's less taxation revenue to fund public services and whatever else. And so there's an extent to which, right, that the things which exist in the world around us are the result of labor. So a reduction in the number of the amount of available labor necessarily means a reduction to the number of like services and material things around us.
But we can't have that. I don't want my standard of living to decrease.
Well, yes, that's true. But then there's also just a ton of stuff in the world around us which is so expensive to do and requires so much taxpayer money because of how we structure the economy and how we tax.
Are you talking about
work and tax wealth sort of thing, i.e. we don't do a particularly good job of that.
Yeah.
So, if there was like a fundamental restructuring of how goods and assets are like taxed, it's not unreasonable to think that some of the issues with like less people working, generating taxation revenue could be ameliorated, not all of them.
Well,
but
hasn't that idea been posited that like, long term, we will need less and less human labor to generate the same amount of output.
Very
as if you
techno-optimist over here. Yeah, so that is the argument, which like
which hasn't proven to be true.
No, yeah.
Like we've seen,
still requires one person and one hand to wipe someone's ass.
Yes, but more generally, like we've had this massive advent of technology in my lifetime, which has made business more effective. It's made hopefully all parts of the economy more efficient.
And productivity has increased.
Efficiency is productivity, and productivity has increased overall. But we're also seeing at the moment that productivity has sort of just flatlined. Yeah. Like we're at the stage now where productivity growth is less than 1%.
Within Australia, yeah.
Within Australia.
Yeah.
And that's, the Australian economy is mostly fake.
What do you mean the economy? It's a housing market.
It's a housing market with a hole out the back
Yeah.
where they dig up rocks.
Yeah.
Yeah. So
Where they dig up the backyard.
yeah, exactly. Where we just destroy the backyard just so we can have a bigger house.
Yeah.
But I think there's the notion, especially, and this leads sort of to our, do you think we've said enough about birth rates? Because this could be a nice segue into our next topic. But the notion of productivity being driven by technology leads us sort of more to our next topic, which is AI. And there's been this level of, I wouldn't say optimism, because I don't think that's the right word. I think it's been like forced, or more so rammed down our throats, that AI is going to be the solver of all productivity problems. I.e., if you just get on board with AI, and if you just
Stop complaining.
if you just use it for every single part of your work,
Yeah.
everything's going to be better, and you just have to use it all the time because it's going to make things so much more productive.
Yeah.
I don't think that's the case. I think if you look at the transformational technologies of my lifetime, so I'm 30, 31, you've got personal computing, what's that, like late 80s or around then? Personal computing, internet, mobile computing, right? Those are the big three. And then what? Social media. It's not really a game changer. It's more like a revenue raiser, sort of marketing, advertising, black hole.
It's like
something. But personal computing into the World Wide Web, into mobile computing, changed the way the world works. 100%. You know, you went from working on a typewriter to, you know, Google Docs with all your friends that you can all edit at the same time. You went from
anywhere in the world.
Exactly. Email, instant messaging, to Zoom, to totally remote distributed workforces. The efficiency and productivity ramifications of those technologies have been huge. And that's why those companies are pretty much the most valuable companies in the world. And they're now looking for ways to further their position as the most valuable companies, or the product leaders in the new technology, which is AI. And hence we're getting this conversation around, you have to use AI. It's going to change your life. I'm yet to find a use case for AI that doesn't involve expanding on an idea that I've already had with more words.
Yeah.
Not even better words, just more words. You put in some words and it'll give you more words, and then you can just like use those to make like a bigger paragraph.
Yeah.
I don't think it really hasn't got to anywhere where I think it is the insanely overpriced sort of commodity that it's become. And it's not even, we're not even paying for it yet. You know, like a lot of these products and services are still
not paying cost.
Mostly free.
Yeah.
They're subsidized by capital. And it's still not great. No. And it's also to the stage where it's getting harder and harder for them to actually make more gains in the underlying technology that that powers AI. The language models are becoming harder and harder to train because they're becoming bigger and bigger.
Yeah. So a couple of things I like to say that on the AI topic. So I sort of agree that I struggle to find a use for it. In my job, I work in like IT, sort of project management, and people tell me, oh man, you can use it to like write emails. And I'm yet to find an instance where I need to basically send an email to someone that the time it takes me, because it's like a lot of technical content, the time it takes me to figure out how I tell, first of all, I can't really use a lot of AI. We have an in-house one that we can use. But by the time I've engineered a prompt, I can just write the email and I haven't outsourced the skill of writing.
Yeah.
So there's that. B, you talk about like the valuation kind of it. So my understanding of the current valuation, which, you know, Magnificent Seven stuff, is kind of based on the idea of like in technology industries, kind of first movers. There's a huge advantage to being first mover. So that's things like how Facebook was kind of like the first decently good social media platform. There was like, was it MySpace?
Yeah, MySpace. Bebo.
That's telling my age that I've like struggled to remember the name MySpace.
I mean, look, I had MySpace,
anyway,
I had Bebo, but Facebook was like crack when it first came out. Anyway.
So the first one that had like a decently good like deployment or like, you know, use case just like dominated and has dominated since, right? So that's why the valuations on some of these companies is so high. It's because like if you invest in the one which becomes it's like sort of sky's the limit in terms of like the value. And that's why you see like some insane like PE ratios. I mean, are they even like, actually, as you say, we don't even pay for them a lot of the time. So like, do they have technically.
What is the revenue stream? You
Yeah,
know?
exactly,
What
yeah.
are we going to charge per prompt? Like,
Yeah.
what is the? Is it?
Well,
I think
Sora
it's
charges 50 cents a second for high quality video.
I
I think I saw that today.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
I think it's going to be a subscription, right? It's going to
Yeah.
be a service that becomes integrated into your, your smart home, into your
Yeah.
smartphone, into your watch.
Yeah.
So
Yeah,
you can always access your assistant, and it's like,
Yeah.
what do we need these assistants for? Like, what are they actually going to do? Do I need someone to jot down a shopping list and then read it back to me?
Yeah.
No, I can just use it. Like, that's the other
Do
thing.
I ask it what I need
No,
to
you know-
buy from the shops?
You should know.
Yeah, I think you should. I think like
You know, like-
you don't need to outsource every small part of inconvenience and thinking in your life.
But I think that's what
That's what it's marketed.
That's what it's going to be. It's like,
Positive.
well, don't think.
Yeah.
Just prompt.
Yeah.
Like, just say, how should I? And like, this speaks to sort of the level of emotional. I don't want to say like. I don't think people are emotionally stunted, but like, or are unwilling to connect person to person. But like the amount of people who use AI chatbots as
Man.
as like proxy relationships.
Yeah.
You know, and it's purely because they're always available. Like,
Yeah.
if you message someone, it's like in real life, if you were to text someone that you might like and they don't get back to you, it's not a good feeling.
No.
You know? Oh, they don't. Oh no. Maybe their phone died.
Check your phone.
Yeah, you know, like it just becomes this like, and then you have to convince yourself that you don't actually care
Yeah.
and that you hate them. And then like they text you back, you're like, oh, phew, I knew they liked me. Blah blah blah. You know.
I
but-
knew it,
yeah, but you text an AI and it's, hey,
straight away.
thanks
yeah.
for messaging.
Yeah.
Look, I don't know. I've never texted an
Yeah.
AI. Blah blah blah.
Yeah.
But like, people love it. They love the immediacy. They love the continual interaction. And it's like when you want them, they're there.
Yeah.
There's no. That also removes the friction of like human relationships.
Yeah.
You know, sometimes people aren't going to text back.
Yeah.
Maybe they're asleep. Maybe
Yeah,
you know
'cause
their
they're
phones
human.
died.
They're not
Maybe their
perfect.
mum fucking cracked it. Like
Yeah.
reasons. There's going to be reasons why they don't respond to you.
Yeah.
And it's how you deal with that as a human. You can't expect this constant, and that's probably a complaint more about, I think, people being perennially online,
Yeah.
terminally online.
Yeah.
Like-
Well, I mean, yeah, I agree. I think there's amongst some people like a growing sort of amount of like, they just, because one of the things about the AI companions as well is, yes, it's the immediacy A, and then it's B. In AI, it's referred to as sycophancy a lot of the time, which is the idea of like it's non-confrontational. It doesn't really challenge you.
Wow, that's such a great idea.
Yeah, wow.
Yeah.
And it's
Oh,
just like,
that's
and
such a
it's
good
really like reaffirming
Yeah.
in that way.
Which is, I think, an echo chamber at its worst.
Oh.
Well, it's an echo chamber at its worst, and it's like it can convince you to kill yourself at its absolute worst.
Well, it's like, it's kind of like a conversational version of like your TikTok algorithm,
That's
where it's like you
interesting.
see shit you like, and you're like, oh, nice, and then it gets you to engage and like just really fall in.
And I think that becomes the marketing, well, not marketing, but that becomes like a strategy. It becomes like, we wouldn't want them to log off. We'll just keep telling them stuff they want to hear. And like, large language models are like mostly predictive models. They're just trying to give you stuff that statistically, this is the next most probable thing in this sentence. But at what point the AI creators have said, it's a black box. We don't really know what's going on inside. But at what point do you think they've sort of tweaked some stuff to say, maybe we just keep them on the hook a little bit longer?
Yeah.
Like, what are the tools? What are the techniques they're using? Like, this has been explored time and time again with social media. It's like the emotion that gets people to stay on your platform longer is anger.
Yeah.
And it's like seething rage.
Yeah.
So what do you show them more of?
Yeah.
If for whatever reason you're anti-immigrant, you're going to get immigration stories. You're going to get immigrants that ruin the
I came
country.
here with my
I
83 friends, and we rented
robbed a
one
Walmart
flat,
and then we killed your grandma. Like,
yeah.
that's what you get served.
Yeah.
And at this stage, a lot of that stuff is pretty much recursive because it's like, maybe that stuff didn't even happen.
Yeah. Or maybe it wasn't really, you're like, oh, well, that's kind of shit. And then you see more of it and you're like, damn, that's crazy. And you see
everywhere.
more and you're like, this is just the world now.
And then,
oh,
I read an article today from some American politician, and they were saying like, we are algorithmically polarized.
Yeah.
We have become algorithmically polarized in all aspects of our life. And that's what AI is going to do.
Yeah. Yeah. Two things I'd want to say there. So like on the algorithmic polarization thing. So I listened to, as I started this conversation with the Modern Wisdom, and I like that because he has some guests who I necessarily don't agree with. And one of them recently, I can check the name, but I can't remember. But he basically spoke about like a lot of things which I sort of broadly disagreed with, in terms of like anti-woke stuff. And when he was talking about like anti-woke stuff and blah, 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 it just like, when he was talking, I was like, holy shit, we have completely different algorithms. I don't see any of the stuff you're talking about. Like nothing you've said is like even rings a bell for me in terms of...
Totally believe it. Like I've looked over, so I work with older men from time to time. And you sort of like, you find yourself peering over their shoulder at their phone and it's like, what is this world that you live in? And they're like sort of impassive, just scrolling away. Yeah. And it's like over their shoulder, it's like, this is the end of times. This is the rapture. Like it is, tomorrow is the absolute definitive end of humanity as we know it because it's so bad. Yeah. And then my feed is like cooking shows and like,
some car content.
Yeah, maybe
I got something about a vintage F40 or some shit going on.
Like
F40's not vintage.
They'll sprinkle in some little baited hooks around, like, or maybe a Joe Rogan clip. You're like,
nah,
not interested. Like, they'll sprinkle in some stuff which is like, well, based on your demographic, this
get a sports gambling ad.
Literally, I'll get like, for some reason, I get like, NFL highlights. Yeah. I get sort of generic stuff that your age group and demo might be interested in, and we'll just sprinkle that in case you might like press it one day, and then it's like, oh, it's something else we can try and flog you. But like, yeah, the algorithmic polarization, I thought that was a really interesting take.
Yeah. Yeah, it is. And so the other thing that I wanted to mention is like, people's use of AI as like companions. So there was a segment on Radio National which I found quite interesting, and it basically followed like a that is an hour, by the way, but I don't feel the need to stop. So it basically followed a middle-aged, well, it was a discussion with a middle-aged woman who uses an AI chatbot kind of initially for companionship, and then it's kind of like morphed more into like a romantic relationship.
I think I heard this one. I was listening to this.
And I found that like kind of her story of it quite interesting, because it was, yes, companionship to start with, and then she does talk about like, yes, the romance and like the erotic aspect of it, if you can call it that. Which
I struggle. I mean, look, people can fall in love with anything.
Literally.
That's just the way it works.
TLC had the guy with the car, right? Crazy shit.
But this is
anyway. So people like talk about like that, and like I mean, so I heard it, and like my gut instinct was like, oof, cringe. But I did try to empathize and humanize with her, and sort of think about like, well, what does this woman's like life actually look like? Like she is busy with like, I can't remember how many kids she had, at least one. And so she's busy there. She's like separated from her husband. She's just like sort of flat out. And so like the immediacy that we talked about, huge.
That was the point she made.
Someone was just there and available for her.
She said that when talking to men on dating apps, it was so infrequent and they didn't even hold a candle.
That's right. That is what she said.
That's what she said. Didn't hold a candle to her AI companion.
Yeah.
Because they weren't interesting. She was always trying to prompt the conversation. She was always pushing, the boat. Like she was driving the boat. She was forcing it to happen. And these guys are sort of vaguely uninterested. And part of me just says, they weren't interested in you. That's it. That's fine. Just say, thanks for your time. Yeah. We're not getting along. And I'll best of luck.
But that did get me sort of thinking about like, what is your dating prospects like as an older person? Like
grim.
Middle-aged people, they talk about dating.
What are your dating prospects like post-30? Grim. Until terrible. Like 50, when everyone gets divorced.
And there's certainly like a gendered aspect there in terms of like, she is a single woman with kids. Men typically not interested in women who have kids.
Oh, men are
so like, for her, it's probably like pretty brutal out there to try and find real human connection.
But I think...
you think you humanize on that and you're like... And I still came back to it. It's still just a cringe thing to do. Sorry, I came back to cringe.
It is. Like, but it's also... I think there's a level of techno illiteracy there where it's like they don't understand.
It's not real. There's so completely not real.
Not even not real, like completely fake. Yeah. Like the emotions you're feeling are like just...
Yeah. But then is it
which is kind of sad.
But then is it like, well...
maybe they are fake, but they feel real.
Yeah. But then it's just like, well, is everything that fake that you see or makes you feel something Is porn?
Well, it definitely
Where
is.
does
It
porn
definitely
plug
is when
into
it's
that
coming out of
conversation?
a. Definitely is when it's coming out of an LLM.
Yeah,
like,
that's true. Yeah.
I mean, yeah, but it's also, I think, it's an unreasonable expectation of what the dating pool or the dating. Look, I haven't dated for a long time, but mate, what is a good expectation to have of that market, that dating market at that period in your life? Like, I don't think it'd be that flash.
No.
Maybe it's just like, time to focus on. I mean, everyone's got, well, I don't know. Is everyone entitled to romance? Like, is everyone entitled to, like, a second, third, fourth, fifth love?
Yeah.
Yeah.
And it is also like with romance, right? Because it's, I think people just kind of want to get to that immediate sense of like intimacy and familiarity with someone, which is not how it works with a human being, right? You only get there once you like push through all the like weird, awkward shit, and it's, I mean, if you even get there, right? Because statistically, you probably won't.
It's a game, like, and I think also like the number of prospective partners you have, I think when you're young is obviously much higher than it would be when you're old. But even when you're young, like socially, culturally, like demographic, like it's already a pretty narrow pool.
Yeah.
Like, maybe just narrow it down to like your suburb.
Yeah.
Like, what have you, like, okay, that's the same like postcode, that's the same like sort of general wealth level and like, social status and stuff.
Birth rate.
Like that's, like there's maybe 50, I don't know how big your sub, but you know what I mean? Like, okay, well, half them, just assume half them don't like you because they don't like you. And then it's like, well, half of them will have some strength. There's also, that actually leads to another, like one of my nitpicky complaints. This notion of icks. You having an ick is an ick. It's just stupid.
Yeah, if you're like on the lookout for icks.
If you have a list of icks, or if you go back to your friend group and say, oh, I had an ick, and men do this as well. I think women, it seems to be more publicized, but like icks are a scam. They're just, I don't know who's trying to convince you that you need to be single. Well, but like, get over the ick.
Well, that goes back to the idea of like increasing amounts of like individualism and not willing to compromise.
There is no perfect partner.
Something about
there is
yourself.
no perfect partner.
Yeah. Like, so another thing from the Modern Wisdom podcast was it's described as kind of like lamp theory, which is the idea of like, so you're looking for a partner, and when you're young, it's like similar to if you just moved into like an apartment. So it's like you don't have anything kind of thing. So you can kind of just get any lamp, and it'll be there, and you can like build a life around it and build a style around it, and like you look back in 20 years and be like, I still like the lamp. It's a good lamp. But
because your whole life fits around the lamp.
Yes, because you built the style of the apartment around the lamp.
But if the lamp goes,
but if the lamp goes and or you build an apartment when get all your shit in there, and then you have a real sense of personal style, and then you need to find like the perfect lamp. The perfect lamp. And if you've been like a woman who's successful professionally,
that can be intimidating for men.
Yeah, and so there is,
which is a scam, by the way. Should never be intimidated by successful women.
That's right, you shouldn't. Or like so you might be like struggling to find a guy who fits in with all your stuff.
And it would be too hard to redress my entire apartment. I'd have to change who I am. Well, believe it or not, that's probably the answer. Like, there needs to be a coming together and a meeting in the middle.
Tell you what, because you probably don't fit his apartment either. But
no, his apartment is an absolute hellhole. But your apartment is also disgusting. Like, this notion of like, well, I'm not going to change for you. Well, I'm not going to change for you. Well, neither of you are perfect. So you can both change.
Yeah.
I mean, look, I haven't had to date.
I will complain online about the situation.
Oh, of course. Let's further polarize our genders by saying that all women, all men. God, it's actually a miracle that we're here at all.
Hey, Betty, come up.
See, what you need is a dog.
Yeah, that's right.
Yeah.
She's a woman.
She won't let you down.
Not a human woman, obviously, but...
What are you, some kind of creep? But yes. Anyway, that was...
that's
bros.
crazy.
2 bros, 1 couch? Or is it 2 guys, 1 couch?
I thought it was 2 guys, 1 couch.
Yeah, 2 bros is really...
Should I explain the name?
Well, does it need explaining? Please
it's actually a play on word from like a piece of the internet.
Do we have to? Is that where you're going? Fine.
But because we're talking shit.
Oh, I see. Right, okay.
But there's no actual physical shit.
I thought you were going to give us a rundown of this video.
No.
Okay, good. But no, it is a reference to a very old piece of the internet.
Yeah.
Is it very old? Oh,
for the internet probably is. Also, we're not going to say it. If you know what we're talking about,
you're part of our audience.
Yeah, you're part of our audience, and also,
Yeah.
yeah.
Anyway, this was Two Guys, One Couch. Hopefully it gets better.